Listeners, welcome to another episode of In Depth with Miss Ty. This evening, I have a dynamic leader here with me. I will not mention her name right away. I'm just going to give you some information about her and her bio and share all the amazing things that she's doing within her personal life, in her community, and in her workforce. And so, guys, you're in for a treat, I tell you. So, let's get it going. This dynamic leader is an advocate for equity, inclusion, diversity, and social justice with an over decade of experience in higher education, diversity programming, and organizational development. Currently pursuing a Ph.D. in higher education at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. In her role as director of DEIB, which she will explain those acronyms to you later on in her introduction, and leadership development at Hillside. She designs, implements transformative strategies that promote equity and inclusion across organizational systems. She has held leadership positions at prestigious institutions like Cornell University and Stonehill College, where she developed initiatives to enhance retention, foster cultural humility, and address systemic inequities. Her expertise extends to trauma-informed care, cultural competency training, and supporting marginalized communities in navigating spaces historically not designed to serve them. She is an accomplished presenter and facilitator, delivering workshops on anti-racism, microaggressions, and cultural humility nationwide. She is deeply passionate about education and its transformative power to create opportunities and foster equity. Her commitment to education stems from a desire to dismantle systemic barriers and ensure that individuals from marginalized communities have access to supportive and empowering learning environments. Throughout her career, she has worked to make education a tool for justice, designing strategies to retain underrepresented students, facilitating workshops on cultural humility and anti-racism, and advocating for inclusive policies. She views education as more than just transfer of knowledge. It is a means to foster critical thinking, resilience, and a self-awareness while equipping individuals to navigate and challenge inequitable systems. Her name is Latesha. She believes in the importance of creating spaces where learning is not only academic, but also a holistic and healing approach. Her dedication to education is driven by her unwavering belief in its potential to change lives and to contribute to a more equitable and just society. Latesha Fussell, welcome to Hindsight Media Radio 103.5 FM, where there's always something good to talk about.
Mm. Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, if you do not mind, if you can just kind of tell the listeners a little bit about your passion for DEIB and what piqued your interest in such a heart-wrenching, let's just call it movement.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to add to that wonderful intro that you read of me. So thank you. So once again, my name is Latesha Fussell. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a doctoral candidate at UMass Boston. I come to you as a native of Brooklyn, New York, which I'm very proud of. And as you mentioned, I'm a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging practitioner at one of the oldest family and youth nonprofit human services organizations in Western and Central New York. And in addition to all of that, I'm a mother to one of the dopest 7-year-old boys you will ever meet. I look at my baby every day and know that I'm doing something good in the world. To answer your question in terms of the DEIB space, which I'll use that acronym for the rest of the podcast, um, what brought me to it was not seeing someone that looked like me in higher education. And so, growing up in a predominantly Black and Brown community in Brooklyn, all of my educators from K through 12 were Black, as well as administrators. So all of my teachers, assistant principals, guidance counselors were Black. Not knowing at the time growing up was realizing that that was a very unique experience for a lot of children. I mean, I even think about the school that I went to, my elementary school, Charles A. Dawsey, which was named after a Black man. So growing up in that culture and then going off to a predominantly white institution and not seeing any faculty or staff that looked like me, it was a huge culture shock. And so I was committed to, once graduating, that I wanted to be that person that our youth needed to see when they entered higher education. And so I was given the opportunity. I started off my career as an educational opportunity program counselor, a program that gave me an opportunity to go into higher education. And then from there, I was given the opportunity to lead our president advisory committee on DEI. And that really opened up the door for me to say, wait a minute, this could be a career that I go into and achieve that thing that I did never received, which was seeing representation.
Understood, understood. That's good stuff. So, what is the focus of your research study?
Yeah. So as a doctoral candidate right now, my study aims to investigate how Black women faculty who are the only one in their department kind of forge self-definition of self-reliance and independence from the toxic and hostile climate in higher education. I'm really interested in learning from Black women faculty who work at institutions across the country, recognizing that finding joy through service, teaching, and research is often challenging as being the only one in their department for Black women faculty. And
Hmm.
so I really want to understand how this community of Black women craft their own agenda to be seen, heard, and nourished through specific spaces and strategies, even as they work within these existing power hierarchies that are oppressive. Such as, but not limited to, when you think about sexism, racism, and classism. I really want to acquire how they define or shift their approach to research, teaching, and service in order to integrate Black joy into their work lives. And when I think about my research, the sort of significance that may come from it is that it provides an opportunity to understand how Black women faculty who work in these racialized organizations that are oppressive and toxic, how they yet find joy in academia, which
Hmm.
sort of creates this pathway to understand how what retention can look like for this particular population, right? Because we don't necessarily just want to recruit, but we want to retain this particular community. And we know that there's a growing body of research that really indicates that focusing on joy can really cultivate authentic and humane experiences for Black women faculty. So when we think about Black women and Black women's joy in academia, it really creates sort of this recognition that groups are important as in individuals, explicitly affirming their intersecting identities and needs.
Absolutely. So, touch more into that on why are you centering around the emotion of joy? Get more
Yeah,
in depth with that.
yeah. And so there's there's we have this really long history knowing that Black people, especially Black women, have always, even under the sort of harshest of societal conditions, they lived, loved, and experienced joy. And so
Hmm.
for decades, Black women really have steered social movements through their work and have found ways to explicitly center joy while fighting against various forms of oppression. If you even look at the work of Zora Neale Hurston's novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God,
Yes.
she positions Black joy through one of the main characters, Janie's journey of sort of transcending various forms of oppression that are specific to Black women. And so Hurston's characterization of Janie's life allows the reader to truly see, affirm, and nourish a Black woman. If you look at Black activists and political figures who have created opportunities and movements to foster Black joy, regardless of on how you may feel about this particular movement, but when we think about Black Lives Matter, which was founded by three Black women in 2013 in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer, the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which is a global organization that's not here just in the US, but in the UK and Canada, whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence, which is inflicted on Black communities by the state. And the Black Lives Matter movement explicitly combats and counteracts the sort of violence by creating space for Black imagination, innovation, and centering Black joy. So by doing so, participants within the movement are winning immediately in terms of improvements in Black people's lives. One of my favorite activists and scholars, Tamika Mallory, if you
Mm-hmm.
read her 2021 book, State of Emergency, How We
Yes,
Win in the Country We Build, she speaks briefly in her text about how the political state of the United States during the Obama administration gave this sort of great sense of integrity and pride because she felt seen and recognized by another Black woman, right? Michelle Obama.
absolutely.
And Black women have centered Black joy through opportunities of collectivism up to obtain validation when you think about when they're navigating cultural and effective isolation. So when we think about Black joy, uh, it's been used as a theory, a method, and a political device. Is this one dope scholar, Johnson, in 2015, he mentioned Black joy as an opportunity to sort of stretch one's imagination beyond its societal constraints and allow us to theorize a world in which white supremacy does not dictate our everyday lives. So when we think about Black joy, even on the sort of day to day, it's manifest through the everyday political tactics that are invisible and visible, and
Mm-hmm.
even audible and inaudible. You think about like such as a head nod, a high five, a hip shake,
Mm-hmm.
which really allows Black people to operate outside of white supremacy. So for me, it just seems like it makes sense to center around Black joy when we talk about Black women specifically. And then when we think about even in the realm of education, I don't know if you're familiar with Benita's Love work,
Oh
who's
yeah.
actually Rochester native in her text, when she talks about we want to do more than survive,
Mm-hmm.
she defines Black joy as the radical imagination of collective memories of resistance, trauma, survival, love, and creating home place and cultural modes of expression, which kind of push and expands this abolitionist pedagogies. And love also further explains that Black love is not wishful thinking
Mm-hmm.
when we consider the occupation of teaching, it is through a craft of teaching with love. And so, from Black educators who made it possible for Black people, especially Black women, to stand tall and believe in tomorrow because of the blueprint that was laid out for them.
I love that, and that deserves some snaps. We can give that some snaps.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, full circle. So we were to pivot back to some of the current challenges that Black women faculty navigate in academia that differ from the counterparts. I want to go deeper into that and talk about, if you can, elaborate on, let's use a movie, Hidden Figures. I
Yeah.
think that question speaks so much volumes to that ask
Mhm.
about some of the current challenges Black women faculty navigate in academia or just in any career that they face that differ from the counterparts. So if you were to, in answering that question, if you
Mhm.
were to also talk about, you don't have to talk about the movie, but how that movie speaks to the counterparts that, that differ, how Black women are treated in difference to their counterparts.
Absolutely. I do want to start with this caveat, right? That
Sure.
Black women, they differ in background, experience, and beliefs, right? We're not a monolith.
That's right.
However, they are connected in their struggle to be accepted, respected, and acknowledged, especially within academia and other arenas where whiteness is the norm.
Hmm.
And when you think about Black women faculty experiences specifically, they're navigating something called gender racism. And racism is just a term to illustrate the unique ways that Black women navigate sexism and racism, right? And when we think about Black women faculty, it's not only inside the classroom, but it's outside of the classroom with their students, their colleagues, and just the overall institution. When we think about Black women experiences, they have to navigate these sort of historical tropes and misidentifications centering race and gender, which contributes to this gender racism that Black women faculty experience in higher education. Harris Perry in 2011, she highlighted three tropes that many Black women have experienced in some capacity. One being identified as the Jezebel, a sapphire, or the mammy. And just for the listeners, right, these three tropes have a very painful history of categorizing Black women as lazy, angry, or submissive.
Mhm.
When we think about the mammy trope, it really suggests that Black women should be self-sacrificing, they should be devoted and nurturing to the welfare and preservation of whiteness. These associations closely relate to the relationship between the white slave owner and their mammies. So there's a long history there.
Sure.
Um, then when we think about the sapphire trope, it really aligns with the angry Black woman image that is either difficult to get along with or unpleasant to be around. And then when we think about the Jezebel is depicted as a manipulator, a gold digger, or as someone who used their body as a tool to get what she wants. This last trope was actually expanded by Patton and Haynes in 2018 by introducing this superwoman trope that frames Black women as superhuman or supernatural, have supernatural strength. And the superwoman trope really emerged from dominant tropes like the new model minority, or what commonly known as some folks know, the hashtag like Black girl magic, that really dehumanized the Black women within the academy by identifying them as resilient against all odds, right? So therefore, we should be coming in with our Black girl magic and just fixing everything. We're low resources or no resources. And so these tropes interfere with Black women faculty opportunities to experience joy inside of the academy. And I know you referenced Hidden Figures, but even if you think about their lived experience, right, they're
Right.
supposed to just come in and be able to thrive with really very little
Mhm.
at that time. And so when we think about these tropes, they function as a double-edged sword for Black women. If you conform to these tropes, then you're reinforcing the stereotype. And if you don't meet these sort of expectations, then the tropes that they hold are negatively reflected in evaluations, performance reviews, because then you're being seen as difficult or you're not aligning to what people perceive you should be.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. So, with that being said, personally, have you ever had personal experiences where you were excluded or minimized in your work, especially in the line of DEIB? Have you
Mhm.
found so many challenges with your counterparts or just in general out in the world when trying to be this strong Black woman that people want to have on a pedestal, but then kick down all at the same time? So has it been difficult for you?
Oh, absolutely. Uh, just thinking about just how you show up in spaces, right? You need to be perceived as being very put together. You should be willing to take on any task. There's been some times when I had to understand the power of saying no and understanding no is a full sentence, and that I don't need to add any more rationale when I know in some job descriptions it's like other duties as assigned.
Mhm.
And then I had to help folks around me to understand that even if that line is there, I still need to understand the scope of the work. And if I feel like that scope of the work is outside of my day-to-day responsibilities, then we need to find somebody else, or that we need to find somewhere where there's additional compensation. And so that is sometimes a hard pill for some people to swallow, um, not expecting, right? So I've been perceived as that angry Black woman before in spaces, especially in the workplace. Also because I don't walk around with a smile on my face all the time. And that's perfectly fine. Maybe I don't have anything to smile about that day. But then I received messages that, oh, well, you looked really angry or you looked upset. And so that's why I didn't come up and talk to you, right? Not realizing that that could impact someone in terms of how they show up.
Absolutely. And it's that people don't understand that there is a wavering of moments. Today doesn't mean that you're sad because you're not smiling. It's one
Right.
of those you're danged if you do, you're danged if you don't. I've been in a
Mhm.
position to where I'm like super happy. Majority of my life, that's all I know how to be. Human.
Yes.
And I was told before that you're too happy. There's no way that anybody can be this happy. That's
Hmm.
Wow, that's it. So speaking to what you just stated, is you're danged if you do, you're danged if you don't. You're danged if you're happy and you smile. You're danged
Yep.
if you just not having a smile. Doesn't mean anything is wrong. You're just having a moment where it's not necessary.
Right, right.
It's not
And this
necessary.
and this shows up with when you specifically think about Black women faculty, even the way that they move. So in higher education, when we think about the promotion and tenure process,
Mhm,
a lot of times there's these expectations about how they should be performing their research. Um, when we think about women, the women are typically relational individuals, so they like to do things in community.
mhm,
And a lot of times when they're up for a review in higher ed, their work is they receive more scrutiny and is seen as devalued because they weren't the only one on that research project. And it creates a lot of stress and anxiety, and ultimately impacts their retention at their institution, or the fact that their epistemologies, the way of thinking is very different, just because of their exposure to certain research areas, are a lot of times scrutinized, and it can leave a really scarring impact on if someone even wants to become a full tenure professor.
absolutely.
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
and then this additional work that they experience, and I experienced this too, when we go back to this mammy trope.
Mm,
It's this having to feel, and this is across the board for a lot of faculty members, especially if you're working at a predominantly white institution and you're the only one, that you have to serve as a role model, a mentor, even sometimes as a surrogate parent to racially minoritized students. And that's something that I had to experience as well, right? Sometimes I used to go back to my office and there'll be students who I never even met before, standing by my door, wanting to just to connect with me because they don't have anyone else that looked like them in their department. And they heard that I helped another student that's in my department at the time. And so this this cultural taxation that faculty members of color have to fulfill sometimes is not even considered in the promotion or review tenure process, because now they have to serve as this role model, and it's moving them away from their research, their teaching, and their service.
Have you ever felt that or felt the weight on your shoulders, like you having to be, like if you're the only or a small percentage of those in your sphere for DEIB, have you ever felt that it was just too much, or how did you navigate through this weight of being the person to talk about DEIB when we know currently right now that we're having an administration who wants to dismantle it? And
Mhm.
so how are you staying connected in this work with all of this?
Yeah, being in community is really important for me. And so one of my scholar crushes is Kimberly Crenshaw, and just following her work. She had a talk with Nina Turner, who I also just love and adore, and just following, knowing that among Black people, we work in community, and and that's where our ancestors has done. We worked in community. If you think about any major movement among Black people, we know that we should not do anything alone. And in order to be effective, we should work side by side. And so I always lean on people who has been doing this work a lot longer than me to follow their lead, right? I mentioned Tamika Mallory.
Mhm.
She's very active in the movement, even when people are not really focused on the movement, right? Right now is the big tagline about dismantling DEIB or DEIBA. But I know that in order to stay in this fight, rest is resistance, right? And so I don't need to be everywhere all the time. I need time to fill in, pour into myself, so that when it is time for me to stand up and fight, I'm capable of doing that. But just to directly answer your question, I'm moving in community. I'm following people who's been doing this work for quite some time, and storing my strength by resting.
I love that. I love that. So let's pivot on. Do you have n- any type of advice or information that you can impart on the listeners here this evening just about DEIB or DEIBA from your perspective if they're looking to get into the message, or I don't want to call it a following because this is something that's necessary that we can't do it as one of those right nows, like, oh, it's just in the moment, right? It's
Right,
something that has to be done every single day. It's like you get up in the morning, you do your stretches and you make your bed, and, prepare for the day.
right.
DEIB or DEIBA is something that we have to work towards daily and work on daily. We can't just let it be a
Mm,
moment of action and then it's forgotten. Like
yep,
a lot of the unrest that happened, right?
mm,
It's high at the top of the list and then it dies down.
yep.
And we can't have that. So, what advice can you impart on those that's interested in getting involved and truly, truly being passionate about DEIB or DEIBA?
Mhm. I say get connected to your local organizations who's doing this work every single day. I always tell people don't reinvent the wheel um, because then we continue to create silos. And especially during these challenging times, we need to be more in community. So look for your local NAACP, look for your local urban league. I'm connected to both of those. Look for communities that are doing work around supporting disability communities who have disabilities. Stay connected to your local folks because those are the people that you're going to see make the largest impact to your day to day, right? I think a lot of times we focus on the federal level because that's where who gets most of the limelight with through the media. But I always even tell people your local elections matter more than your federal elections, right? And so even though right now we're having some really challenging times, that's when local community needs to come together even quicker and be even more stronger than ever before. Um, Find folks, connect with your elders, right? Because they have been through this fight before. I remember just even talking to my dad um, about some of the troubling things that have been on the news. And he sat me down and he said, this is very similar to when Nixon was in office.
Hmm,
Uh, and that put things in perspective that we've been here before,
sure.
right? So as everyone is running around saying fire, 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 no one's sitting back. Very little of us are sitting back and saying, wait, let's study our history and say, okay, what could we learn from the playbook before us?
Wow, this is history repeating itself. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And
absolutely,
history tends to, and
absolutely.
one of the most powerful things one of my elders have said is that we know historically when we make 8 steps forward, we're going to take 16 steps back.
Hmm,
Right? And so how do we make sure that the next time we will get to a point where we're going to take 8 more steps forward, but when we get to that point, how do we make sure that it's sustainable and that it won't and that we don't move back? What tends to happen is that we get so comfortable in some of the privileges that we earn that we don't feel like that we can actually go back. And I
absolutely.
think there's sometimes moment in our history is to remind us that we need to stay in the fight and we should never get comfortable.
Absolutely. So tell us what's next for you. We know that you are doing this research study. Talk more to that and how can our listeners and just anybody that's tuning in, whether it be on YouTube or Hindsight Socials or on
Mhm.
the station itself, how can people plug into you and what it is that you're doing, following you on your social media channels or any other outlets, any conferences that you're doing. But most importantly, your main call to action right now is to have, a handful of Black women faculty to participate in the research study. So if you can speak to that and then lead us off, end us with how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I'm trying to graduate.
If
So,
you're not
uh,
trying, you're doing. You're in the
yes,
process.
yes.
How you doing
Oh, and so currently I am looking for 5 to 8 Black women faculty to participate in my research study. And so if you could connect with me by just emailing me or find me on social media, all my social media platforms is my name, Latesha, and then last name Fussell, Fussell. It's like Russell, but with an F. So you can find me there. I know I'm going to send the link directly to my survey. So I just really, I'm looking for Black women, people who self-identify as Black, a woman, a faculty member. You must have access to an electronic device because there is a brief survey just to filter through to make sure that you meet my criteria. You have to be the only Black woman in your department. And the reason why is because after you complete the survey, we will have something called a sister circle, a virtual sister circle. And I want to help build community. And so if you are interested in building community with other Black women, please, please, please complete the survey and I'll reach out to you. The survey should be less than 20 minutes but it's really centering about how you define joy in research, service, and teaching. And then, like I said, you'll connect just one time only through a sister circle just to connect with some other women. And it's across the country. So please, 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 if you have any questions, reach out to me via email. My email is also Latesha, full name, dot Fussell 001 at umb.edu. So that's Latesha dot Fussell 001 at umb.edu.
I love that. And we look forward to supporting you more, Dr. Future Doctor.
Yes.
Absolutely. We love that. And we would love for you to return just to share more. And just one last question for you within the research study. So, the women who are interested in applying, do they have to be in the field of education, or is that just a main preference, or it can be in any other field? However, they are the only woman of color in their department or their career field.
It could be any field. You just have to work in higher education. So any college or university. I'm hoping to get participants that's in different fields because when we think about Black joy, it doesn't necessarily, our fields are not connecting us, it's our identity.
Sure.
And so any department, but just having to work in higher education, so any college or university.
Super fantastic. So, future Dr. Fussell, thank
Yes.
you so very much for your time and your energy and your knowledge on Hindsight Media Radio 103.5 FM, where there's always something good to talk about. Do you have any final words before we end?
No, just thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to connecting with you soon.
Absolutely. And we'll be sure to post all of your socials and information to our YouTube and all of our socials so that those can follow you and those interested in the research study can participate. And we look forward to your continued success. And we appreciate you for joining us this evening.
All right. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.